Hello, hope you are staying warm and dry. Hopefully, I don't know. It seemed like the snow is hitting up north. I was up there today visiting a school, and hopefully you're all staying safe and warm. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. So good to see you. Thank you everyone for being here. All right. Well, it is 1:45, so I'm gonna hit start for us. We are recording, so we will get going. Welcome to Directors Meeting. As I mentioned, it's 1:45, so it's a little later than normal. Hopefully you appreciated having a little extra time. Our agenda was short today, so we thought, let's just meet the time that we need to meet. So we'll start out. I've got Dr. Kramer here, and he'll do kind of an introduction for us. And then I'll share a few thoughts too. And then we've got Shannon Greer here as well from the association, and she's got a few announcements. And then if you've looked ahead at our agenda, we have the Safe Child Project coming to do some updates about this current legislative session. We have School Land Trust here. We love hearing from them each month. And then we do have our next session with Ed Direction today, and they're going to be talking about transparent teacher practices and helping you with teacher evaluation, which can always be a great topic as we head into springtime, and how to get some great evaluations in place. So we'll go ahead and pass things over to Dr. Kramer.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone. Hope that your year is starting off well, and that you do have a very good year. And it is our pleasure to support you any way that we can. And I just want to say one of the initiatives that we've had that's been very gratifying has been touring and visiting schools. And if we haven't made it to your school yet or had an opportunity to meet you, we'll look to schedule something soon. Marie has been tracking that a little bit and following along, and we're close to a fifth of our schools that we've had a chance to visit and just make introductions and just talk about the vision that we have to be a supportive authorizer. And so we really appreciate you allowing us to come in to look and talk with you and your board and other people, whoever it is that you're making introductions to. And it's our goal to meet with everybody within a year. And so that's a stated goal. And it's been one of the just highlights of the work that I've been privileged to do. I will say that two takeaways in those visits is that there's great people doing this work. So just outstanding, wonderful people. And it's been great to meet new people and to work alongside you. And then another takeaway in the meetings is just how innovative our schools are in Utah. Different innovative programs, robust programming. There's a lot of very innovative things and schools that are truly happening. And that's something that's clear when you visit a school, when you talk with people. It's very evident that we have a portfolio of very different, very innovative schools with great people that work in them. We're preparing for a board meeting next week, Thursday. You wouldn't have to, but you're always invited to join via Zoom and check things out or kind of follow along some of the different things that our board is doing and working on. For example, we have a couple of charters that we're going to, new charters that applications that'll be reviewed by the board next week. And so our staff is preparing for that meeting next week, Thursday. We're busy like you. We hope that you're having a good new year, good start to your new year. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Marie. So have a good meeting here today.
Thank you so much. Another announcement that we wanted to make, if you've been reading any of our little holiday letters, hopefully you saw that teaser that there was going to be a video coming from Dr. Kramer and myself that gave a little bit more of an introduction, as well as talking about some of our future plans and things that we're hoping to accomplish. And so that we have the video ready and that we will be sending to you later this afternoon. So pop some popcorn, get your comfy socks on. It's supposed to snow, right? So you can definitely watch that later. It's probably not going to win any Academy Awards or anything there, but hopefully it'll make you smile a little bit and at least share some exciting things to look forward to. With that, then we will pass it over to Shannon.
Thank you. I am going to quickly just share my screen if I may. Okay, we've got some exciting trainings coming up. We just wanted to take a minute and share with you. The Administrative Lunch Seminar next week will be on human resources and what directors need to know. Brad Nelson will be providing that training for us. Then in conjunction with the training that we provided in December for you, we have a book study follow-up discussion with Allison Levine and Mary Lou Darrington out of Utah State University on the actionable feedback. And that book study begins at the end of the month. If you're interested in participating in that, in the group chat, I just sent a link to register for that. So if you'd like to do that, we'd love to have you join us. We're really excited to have them with us and to share their knowledge of providing feedback. Also, our spring ACES course begins at the end of the month. So if there's anybody in your building interested in moving into an administrative role, we would love to have them join us for this class. Also in the group chat is a link for that registration. Please share that with those who might be interested. Our Crucial Conversation training is next week. And then we are really excited about the opportunity we have to be holding a conference in St. George in February. We're hoping for beautiful weather so that if you have the opportunity, you can spend Saturday hiking or mountain biking or whatever it is you find time to do. But let me share a little bit about that conference and maybe just a brief explanation of why we feel it was important to put this together. As we look at attrition in school directors, we noticed a trend and some concerns of pretty significant turnover. So in conjunction with Marie and the State Charter School Board, we've developed this conference in hopes of providing opportunities for you to network, to collaborate together, to learn from some professionals in the field, and also to have an opportunity to be rejuvenated in your practice. So we've invited 2 guest speakers who will be doing their presentation in the morning, and then you'll have the opportunity to go into sessions with each of them and do a deeper dive into their topics. We'll have an opportunity to meet together as elementary school directors and high school directors. And then in the evening, we've got Dr. Stacy Taniguchi, who will be joining us and speaking to us on the importance of thriving, not just living, not just surviving, but thriving and how we can do that well. The whole conference, including the evening entertainment and dinner, will be covered through a grant from the State Charter School Board. And in addition to that, for those who live outside of the 60-mile radius, there will be hotel rooms available for you. So if you're interested in participating and you would like to join us in St. George, the link for that one is also in the group chat. And just click on that, register yourself, and then we'll take care of it from there. We're excited about this opportunity. I met with Dr. Taniguchi earlier today, and he is very motivational. And I'm excited to have him here with us and spend some time with charter school directors. We'd love to see you, and we look forward to rubbing shoulders with you, not only at that conference, Crucial Conversations, but also in our admin lunch seminars later this month. Thank you, Marie, for giving me the opportunity to share these upcoming events.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, we are really looking forward to that and hope to see lots of you there and enjoying some nicer weather and a really great day of learning and hopefully some fun hiking and things the next day as well. So definitely looking forward to that. Um, let's see, I believe up next we've got the Safe Child Project with Mary Catherine Perry. It looks like she is logging on right now. So we will give a moment for her to get in with us. Well, we have a little break, I guess. Hopefully she'll get right on. Maybe there's a technical difficulty there. Hopefully everyone had a great start to their new year, a wonderful winter break, and was able to relax and get some rejuvenation. We are also looking forward to on your timeline. Hopefully you've seen that legislative session starts next week. That's something we've been working towards here in addition to board meeting next week. And then we do have Charter Day on the Hill coming up on the 23rd. So hopefully lots of you will be there as well. We would love to see you. Dr. Kramer and myself and a few of our staff will also be there. So if you're at Charter Day on the Hill, we would love you to come say hi. Or at that conference in St. George, we'd love you to say hi. As Dr. Kramer said, we're trying to get out and see as many of you as possible and get to your schools and hear all the great things that are happening. So it looks like Mary Catherine is here now. So Mary Catherine, we will turn the time over to you.
Hi, Marie. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn
No
on my
problem. Thank you for
camera.
joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
It's
let's
always
see.
a pleasure to have the Policy Project on with us.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay,
Shoot.
looks like our camera is being funny. Hold on, we're going to try one other thing really quickly. Sorry about that.
Let's see.
Try that one.
Let's see if this works.
Oh, maybe try sharing your screen and see if we can just share the presentation.
Let's see.
Okay.
Is that not working? Okay. Hold on one second. Sorry, Marie. We're in Iron County just trying to get this going. Hold on one second.
There's one thing charter schools are very good at, which is being flexible, right? We're kind of experts in that.
Thank you. Oh,
Why it's
working?
turned around.
oh, let's see.
It's what on earth?
I think
It's should we do it? Oh, we can't. Disconnect.
Does
Oh,
look like you have a camera on.
yes,
let's try
it was
this.
on my phone. Okay.
oh,
There we
go. Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, ladies.
I'm so sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much, charter school directors. We are so grateful for your time. And Marie, thank you so much. You're always so generous to allow us to share and be here. And so we're so grateful. Emily, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Emily Bell McCormick. I am the president and founder of the Policy Project. It's so lovely to be back with you. Thank you for having us.
And I'm Mary Catherine Perry. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs with the Policy Project. And we wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about our current project. And Emily actually is going to give us some background on kind of how you're familiar with us already, and then we'll go into this next project.
Yeah, so we have worked with you before on the Period Project, which was basically the effort to get period products like tampons, pads into all of those girls' bathrooms in the state of Utah. So thank you so much for your work on that. You were wonderful, and hopefully that's going well. If not, circle up with us after because we want to hear about it. We also worked with you this last year on teen centers. So teen centers were the effort to get resources into some of the schools in the state of Utah. I believe we have several charter schools that have applied for a teen center. It's basically a resource center with a washer, dryer, grab and go food, showers, things like that for your students who are experiencing need or maybe don't have access to those things in their home situation. And so we're so grateful for your support in that. And this year, as you are probably aware, we're going to
And
just share our screen.
Marie,
Go
can
ahead.
we share our screen? Or is that something I
Yeah, you should have all those privileges.
let's see. Okay.
Okay, just while we're pulling this up, and you're going to see a gorgeous image behind this once we get there. But just while we're pulling this up, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about our new project and kind of how we got into that. So we're working, or one of our biggest goals in the way that we do things, we're just a nonprofit, and we're really interested in policy because we have this belief that policy has this great ability to go wide and to do a lot for society. And so we use that as a tool to do the Period Project and to make sure that all the schools could get it and get some funding for it. Also do that with teen centers. So we are now working on this with a new project called the Safe Child Project. It's about child sexual abuse. But we'll continue to use the model that we've always used, which is using the community, which is why we're in Iron County right now. We were in Washington County last night, just kind of going around and talking to people about this, the Utah legislature and private donors. So the reason our big interest in policy is not because we want to spend our days on the Hill, not that, it's because what we see is that it can really go upstream of a problem. And so, when we look at some of society's biggest issues, we're hoping to get in there and intervene either before they even happen, before something becomes an issue, or very, very early on, so that we can, the trauma and things related to it is a lot less. So one thing that we found that you're seeing on this slide is that as we looked at some of society's biggest problems, especially for recent high school graduates, there was one extremely common factor in suicide, incarceration, high school dropout rates, substance abuse, the inability to keep meaningful relationships, employment challenges, even homelessness. And that was all of those had as our root factor in them, child sexual abuse. So we decided, okay, we found this common thread. We see the problem. Now, is there anything we can actually do about it? Because sometimes there are policy initiatives that can change things and sometimes there aren't. So what we did is we started looking at what is going on. First, we had to determine what's going on in the state of Utah with our own kids, because maybe it's not really that big of a problem. Turns out Utah is actually, unfortunately, worse than the national average. 1 in 7 of our kids is sexually abused before age 18. Now, one thing that I think is super interesting to note about this statistic is, number one, it's probably underreported. But number two, that stat only includes physical touch. So abuse that is physical touch. So it does not include anything digital. That means movies, imagery, anything like that. So that number would be much, much higher if we were including that with kids. We also know that in Utah, the majority of abuse happens with kids ages 7 to 13. That's pretty young. That's first grade through 6th, 7th grade. So really elementary school ages is where the majority of abuse is happening. 91% of the time, the perpetrator is actually known and trusted by the child or the child's family. So one of the issues, this creates a big issue if we're completely reliant on this happening at home. I can tell you Washington County, where we were yesterday, 55% of the cases were in home, and Iron County seems to think that that's higher, that the child is living with the perpetrator. About half of the abuse is actually perpetrated by a child. So child on child, someone under the age of 18. And on average, a child has to tell someone about 3 times to be believed. So we could see the problem was there. We knew that something needed to change. And as we started working, what we realized is there is a way we can do this. And actually the legislature has teed this up nicely. About 10 years ago, they worked on something that Mary Catherine's going to talk about.
So when we looked at the law and what existed already in statute, we saw that the legislature 10 years ago decided that elementary schools was an appropriate place to essentially allow for child sexual abuse prevention education to happen. And so they created that space in the law 10 years ago and then put some really careful guardrails around it. So if a school decides to do this, the LEA, the school district or the charter school has to make sure the curriculum's approved by the State Board of Education. They need to notify the parents in advance. They need to allow parents to preview the curriculum beforehand. They need to let the parents know that they can accompany their child to it, and also the parent can opt their child out if that doesn't feel appropriate for their circumstances. So it sounds a lot like, and in practice is a lot like maturation that we do here in Utah too. So essentially, the curriculum that is approved by the State Board of Education for a kindergarten student, it might be only about 30 minutes once a year or every other year. And then up to for sixth graders, it's kind of scaffolded. So they kind of build on concepts. It's about 45 minutes on back-to-back days. So it really does not take much time. The LEAs are given a lot of flexibility to do it the way they want. They can have a professional come in and deliver that curriculum to the students, or they can also have it done in-house by somebody that the community knows and trusts. Maybe you have a social worker or a counselor or somebody in your school already that can be trained on it, and then they can turn around and train and provide that for the students. Now, because the legislature has never funded this, and the few nonprofits that can do it have been doing it based on their own private fundraising, which is difficult to do. It's only getting to about 11% of Utah's elementary school students. And so when we learn about kind of why this is happening, and as we've looked at studies, and people wonder, like, we want this to happen at home. You know, just like maturation, children should be learning about this at home in a safe environment, by somebody who knows their child, but that doesn't always happen. And as we talked about, 90% of the time, the abuse happens by somebody that the child or the family knows and trusts. So when you look at all of the many things that schools offer in terms of prevention, you know, whether it's firearm safety or ATV safety or fire safety, we were just talking about if you learn to stop, drop, and roll, there's so many kind of safety elements. But as we've talked to community members, this is really at the top of the things that students need to know about, because they don't always understand what is normal, especially if they're living in an environment where they are told something is normal when it's really not. So while we want this to not just be something that the schools have to worry about, we are also working with communities and families to be able to have these comfortable, like, conversations that might feel awkward or parents aren't sure how to do that. This sometimes kind of opens that up and allows parents to feel more confident and know how to talk to their children. And then truly, as the prevention curriculum, it's not offered by us, but by a third party that would provide that. It truly is so basic. It's more basic than even maturation. It's truly like nobody should be touching you on the parts covered by a swimsuit. And also, let's help identify 5 trusted adults you can talk to if something in your life isn't feeling quite right, and keep telling somebody on that list of 5 people until you get the help that you need. And so those are essentially the concepts that this prevention curriculum would address. And so those are the things that we've talked about. We are very anxious to hear your feedback. We're going to be going to the legislature to get support on this in terms of funding, but also some statutory support to kind of help our schools not just have support from the legislature, but also in terms of funding. We do not want to layer on another responsibility onto schools without giving them the financial support they need for this as well. So we've covered a lot, but we want to hear from you about kind of what your concerns might be, questions, or anything else.
I also just really quickly want to say one thing. We have, some of you may have already seen the Prevent Child Abuse Utah curriculum, but if you have an interest, or if any of your parents have an interest in seeing it, we're doing a full preview of the curriculum on gonna get the date right now. I'll put it in the chat. I believe
February
it's February 7th,
15th,
15th. Yeah,
Mhm.
February 15th at noon. Just a virtual log on. So I will drop that in here. And if people would like to attend that, then please feel like you can. And we're gonna, should we stop sharing?
Yeah. Thank you. So Marie, we're ready for any questions or questions that people have, and feel free to enter them in the chat or.
Yeah, absolutely. So far there's just one comment in chat says, thank you for your efforts with this. Grateful for your support with getting period products as well. And just so our charter directors, just for kind of a expectation setting, we kind of planned about 10 more minutes here. When I was able to meet with Mary Catherine and talk through this, that was one of the questions, you know, what questions will charters have or what kind of feedback? And I said, I know that this group always has great feedback and, you know, loves to share and give, you know, insights on different things or other things to think about. And so I said, let's come to the meeting and ask them there. So if you do have thoughts or feedback, you know, we would love to be able to gather that here. Also, if later on you think of something, I'm sure that looks like you just dropped an email in there too. You know, anytime that you have questions or comments, you can send them my way. I can get them to Mary Catherine, or you can send them directly to them as well.
I had a quick question. How is like perception so far, or kind of how do you think it's going so far with Up on the Hill? With the, I know it hasn't started, but kind of as you've talked to different individuals.
You know, we've talked to a lot of individuals off the Hill in anticipation of this as well. We just finished a lunch in Iron County with the Iron County prosecutors, with the children's justice centers, you know, communities that are truly boots on the ground in this, and they are so in favor of prevention efforts. They are dealing with so much on that back end of trauma and case reporting and things, but they believe that the prevention investment will help down the road with their efforts as well. Now, our legislature is amazing and varied and different and a lot of different things. And so a lot of our conversations have been really positive. But there are different, you know, opinions about things. And sometimes people hear the word sexual, even if it's in the framework of child sexual abuse prevention, and they just get, they have questions. And so we're going through it one-on-one and meeting with lots of legislators. We've met with House leadership and Senate leadership, and we're answering some of those questions, and reception's been good.
What can we do to help, would you say?
We always ask anybody who's supportive to write their legislators. That always helps because I can guarantee there are lots of other people writing them as well. And as charter school directors, your voices are so important. People like you who deal with students day after day after day and see what's happening in our schools, your opinions are so valuable.
Yeah, I would add on. I mean, I think, you know, anything as I know, Tyler, you know, and everyone on this call, because we all work with state funding and those kinds of things, it's a delicate dance, you know, with any issue that comes up. It was with periods, was with teen centers. It definitely is with this. I think Mary Catherine's right that the word sexual sometimes gets people nervous. And so this one takes a little bit longer to explain. Like what we're talking about is prevention. That's like so necessary to the success of our kids and long-term outcomes. So yeah, please write. I know many of you know your legislators well. So if this feels like something, I just, you know, we would expect that they will get a lot of opinions on this. And so we would love, you know, whatever support can be given would be wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to jump into this, Brett Wilson at Ames. So we just went through another meeting with a legislator talking about we all have to be neutral and we can't do anything that's not neutral. I had period products in my school for 6 years before that went through. And I was called all sorts of names and people wouldn't come here because we were too liberal. and we've got to find a balance between what is real and what our patriarchal legislature wants to put in. And this makes sense. But it's a real challenge to do things like this when you're going to get everybody, not everybody, but you're going to get some real strong reactions. And they're already watching our libraries, watching what we do in curriculum and in classes to do. And we're caught in the middle with this. And I'm getting old enough and cranky enough. I either want to fight it and say what I shouldn't say, or not fight it and not do it. And that's the problem.
Yes. I think everybody has had those moments where you're like, oh, I'm just tired. I know that we have them too. Thank you for sharing that. On that same note, I just wanted to share that we were in Washington County yesterday meeting with some school board members for the public schools there. And one of the members, she said, her husband was a county commissioner before that. She's been a school board member for, I can't remember, 6 years or so. And she said that she found out just recently that their cousin had been molesting his daughters, all growing up, molested these 3 girls. And she said that made it incredibly real for her. And I think it was maybe just an awakening for people even in the room to realize, like, this actually, if it's happening to 1 in 7, we're all connected to this in some way, shape, or form. It's either my kid, it's you, it's your kid, it's your student, it's your cousin, we 100% of us are connected to this, and we may or may not know it. And so I would just say, I think sometimes we need to remind people that, like, this impacts us all if it's impacting that many people. And so I appreciate that comment and that thought. We're definitely working on that. And I think those kind of personal stories tend to really hold a lot of weight there.
Yes, and we're going around the state, Southern Utah, Central Utah, Northern Utah, to try and increase awareness to this, to help the conversation, because truly some of that stigma starts at the top. Like, if we're unwilling to correct some of those narratives and say, no, actually prevention education doesn't cause the problem. Prevention education helps the problem. We actually know that in schools where prevention education is not offered, that those children are twice as likely to report as college students that they were sexually abused. Like, if we know these things, if we have studies that can show that prevention education helps, then it's so important for us to begin those conversations. But we're also trying to be so transparent, like Emily said, with the curriculum previews, with, having these conversations to say, we're not trying to box out parents. We're not trying to get in between them or keep this a secret. We want this to be as inclusive as possible, because at the end of the day, this is not just about children or parents' rights. This is about families, and this is about keeping our state and our community and our families and our children healthy and safe. And so we're trying to help the community understand that, as well as our legislative actions as well.
But you're right. There's a lot of shame and stigma around this. So,
Yep.
it's definitely, we're chipping away.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw in the chat box, there was a suggestion. What would happen if you called it child abuse prevention only? So maybe taking the word sexual out of it, would that help? Would that not help? Do you maybe want to speak to that?
It does in some settings and conversations, just to call it child abuse prevention, especially when you look at Prevent Child Abuse's curriculum. They do touch on other forms of child abuse, such as physical, emotional, and neglect, just helping kids understand also not just what's not okay for them, but as they try to break patterns potentially of abuse or things that they're learning as a child, to help them understand, oh, that's not something that you should do as a parent or as an adult in a child's life, to help them kind of understand what is okay and not okay. But also when we move to the legislative action, because that statute is so specific to child sexual abuse prevention, it's hard not to have that word in it. But you're right, that does tend to set off just a little bit of a warning bell for some, where if it weren't there, it might be a different conversation. but thank you. Yeah. And I know we're sitting here and, you know, sometimes it's harder to bring up hard questions or criticisms or things when we're sitting here. If you want to send Marie any follow-up feedback, I'm just sorry, Marie, I'm putting you on the spot. And then you, Marie,
Happy to be on the spot and collect
We're-
feedback for
okay,
you.
good. We
Always.
love hard questions. We love hearing, you know, what abouts and things like that because it helps our communication and it helps our projects become better. So please feel free to follow up after and we'd love to hear any thoughts you have on this.
I'd love a list of different people you think would be the ideal people to reach out to.
Yes.
So who are kind of the ones that sometimes with limited time, you know, if I'm sending an email to somebody who's already all on board. So the ones that are a little bit more sticky,
Yeah, I mean,
opinionated or whatever.
I'll just say really quickly, you know, our House Education Standing Committee, our Senate Education Standing Committee, I'm happy to send those lists over to Marie if she wants to distribute those. Always leadership. You know, we find that there are a lot of legislators who want to do a reasonable and good thing, but they need that support. They need to feel supported by people as yourselves to kind of help push them over to make that vote to use their voice in a positive way. So, you know, I'm happy to send you some of those names. But thank you, Tyler, that I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on today. We always, like I said, always love having the policy project here. We'll love to invite you back, you know, in a month or two and get some updates. And of course, if, as they shared, if you have questions, feedback, comments, I'm happy to receive that and pass that along for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. And
Thank you
thank
so
you to
much.
all of you directors. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
We really do.
Bye-bye.
Have a great
Good
day.
afternoon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, we will now turn the time over to Holly, who's here from School Land Trust.
Hello. I am seeing a lot of the same faces from our meeting just a little bit ago. So my information is going to be the same as reminders of requirements that are coming up, and also to give you some support. So the first thing to remind you about is this role change of the business administrator and how they are now the third step in your approval process for your plan amendments, your final reports, and the upcoming plans. So if we look at this final report approval process, you can see that the data comes over from UPEFS. And then once these final reports open up to you next week, that's when you will go in and complete it. And I said this earlier, but if you will try to please have your final reports completed and then your report to your governing board no later than February 22nd, that will give your business administrators a full week to go in and review the report to make sure that all of the financial data matches before it is due to us at this date on March 1st. And then this is the steps for your upcoming plan and any amendments. So now after you have taken it to the governing board, they've done their approval, that is where your business administrator will go in and do their approval. As they are doing that, please have some open lines of communication with them. They will need to put in a date when things were approved. And if they have any questions about it, they really need to know who to go and contact with that. So like I said, your final reports will be open on Monday. Please remember that as you are going through and completing these, The purpose of the final report is to clearly state how your school land trust funds were spent in the way that they supported the academic goals and student achievement. I did have said this many times. Please remember that there's no personal or student data allowed in these reports because they do become public record. And then our blue box here shows your new requirements as we are going through our school year. So the first is the final report. And then this little star I've added is the LEA assurance, which is a new piece. And then your upcoming plans. And as we get closer to the upcoming plan deadline, I will be providing more information in the meetings. But that is due to the state with all of the levels of approval on April 1st. So with the LEA assurance reminders, this is basically assuring that all of the requirements for the school land trust program have been met. We've asked that this be completed after your final reports. When you have your approval for your upcoming plan from the governing board, before the state takes a look at those upcoming plans. And so some of the things that this is assuring is that the Charter Trust Land Council type has been identified, that the required website postings are on your school website. So if we went through and did a compliance review on your website in the fall, we may be going back and doing a spot check to make sure that that website is now in compliance before we start looking at your upcoming plans. The LEA assurance also assures that training has been provided for the different parties that are involved in the program, and that the final report has been completed, submitted, and approved by all of the different levels. And then it also assures that when the Charter Trust Land Council creates and approves the upcoming plan, they will need to, that they sign a signature sheet. And this is just assuring that each council member was involved in implementing the current school year plan and then helping to develop the upcoming plan. So when it comes down to who fills out this LEA assurance, we only need one assurance per LEA. So we've asked that as directors, you will complete the assurance if there is a single school within your LEA. And if there is an LEA that has multiple satellites, the director will only complete one assurance for the entire LEA and all of the satellites within that. Reminder where you should be on your timeline. If you have not completed any of these tasks from November to February, please make sure that you give yourself some time to get those completed by the time they are due. And then I have some drop-in hours that I will be providing in the next couple of weeks. They are open to you as directors for any questions about the role change for business administrators, final reports, upcoming plans. And also if your business administrators have questions, they are welcome to drop in during that time and I will be able to answer their questions. With that, please reach out to us. Let us know if you have any questions or how we can support you. If I haven't put the slideshow in the chat already, I will. I do have a page of resources, so you can go in and click on those links. We did just launch a new website for the Utah State Board of Education, and that's the very last link there. And then if we have any questions, I am happy to answer those, and let me make sure I send over your slideshow.
Holly, there's 2 questions in the chat. Can you
Okay.
read those, or would you like me to read them to you?
I can read them. So on the SLT website, it says final reports are due February 16th. Is this just the director's portion? Yes, that is. So on the reporting website, we have gone in and we have set that deadline of February 16th to make sure that there is ample time. If you feel that you need extra time, please contact us and let us know of the situation. We know things come up and we are happy to help. And so, yes, the business administrators will still have until March 1st to complete those. And then the second question, does the board have to approve the final report by March 1st? So with this, it's not so much of a board approval. It is letting the board know how the plan went. They had to sign off on it when it was first created, and now it's time to follow up and let them know, were you successful? What does your growth look like? How were those funds truly spent? Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Holly. We
Yeah.
always appreciate having updates from the school land trust team. So thank you for making time for us.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, we're up to our last agenda item. So we have Katie Hurst here from Direction, and it's our next in the series of implementing transparent teacher practices. So we will turn the time over to her.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I share the right screen. Perfect. Excellent. All right. Hopefully everybody's having a great kickoff back from their holiday and that they all had a good restful break from that. But we're super excited to be here with you guys as we jump in when our section on instructional leadership, and diving into that today is talking about creating a needs satisfying environment and providing feedback to teachers, and how the two kind of mesh together and how we can make some big changes in our teaching practices and student learning outcomes. Just as a reminder of where we've been and kind of where we're going, these are all the sessions that we're doing this year. We're right here smack in the middle. We've gotten 2 so far, one back in September and November. And today we're talking about feedback and creating that need satisfying. And next time we come together in March, we're going to be talking about positions of control and open to learning conversations, which we're really excited about. Along here with me today, I've got the famous Charlie Lyons from EdDirection, and he's super excited to be here. And you guys have met him a couple times, so I won't belabor his introduction, but he is our kind of the brains behind human science and how our brains work and all those great behaviors and climate and culture relationship guru to help us out with this. As we jump in today, we've got a couple of learning intentions that we would love to have you guys walk away with. So one is just understanding the 5 basic needs. William Glasser put these together, and Charlie's going to go into depth about these today during our session. So hopefully before we leave, you guys will have a great understanding of what those 5 basic needs are and how you can start utilizing those within your schools. The next one is just best practices for effective feedback. We know that we give our teachers feedback a lot, and we want to make sure we give them the most effective feedback possible. So hopefully we can give you some tips and tricks and some ideas and best practices for how you guys can improve feedback to teachers to help push that learning a little bit further. And then our last learning intentions is just gaining an understanding for how we can combine these two, how we can use basic needs to inform our practices around providing effective feedback to teacher and bringing it all together in the end. If we're successful today, we are going to be able to recognize how basic needs show up in our schools, and we're going to be able to consider how we can create a need satisfying environment and how the two go together. We'll also be successful once we've identified those best practices for effective feedback and considered how we can leverage both of these basic needs and effective feedback strategies to help our teachers and build up the capacity of our teachers in our schools moving forward. So that's kind of our big goal in our overview. I'm going to pass the mic over to Charlie for a few minutes to talk about our brief operating agreement and the agenda for today.
So just a reminder, this is something you all created, so this isn't new information for anyone. But when we first met, we decided as a group that we were going to follow some norms and values together so that we can really maximize our learning. And I think you may remember it just so happened to spell out FAB. So let's not all forget that we're trying hard to be fabulous here as a group, which stands for focusing on the learning and just keeping our time together this hour, really focusing on the learning together, actively participating. We actually have a learning guide you're going to hear a little bit more about. So you'll have an opportunity to participate in the learning guide as we go through the learning, but also welcome to come off mute or drop some notes in the chat. However is best for you to participate. We just ask and know that you guys kind of identified actively participating as an important value as we learn together. And then being present and open. I enjoyed the conversation that we were eavesdropping on the first 30 minutes of this meeting. And then you guys were having some very excellent open conversation about some pretty interesting topics. So I enjoyed hearing that conversation. If you want to continue that being present and open as we learn together, that will be great. So Katie went over the kind of learning targets and the success criteria. We're going to pretty evenly divide these topics up. Just talking a little bit about why feedback's even important, why that's a critical part of our job. And then again, how human motivation and human engagement relates to that feedback. And then hopefully you guys can walk away with some real tangible understanding of some of the ways to make sure that we're giving and providing those that we're leading effective feedback. So 15, 15, and 30 ought to be about the way we divide things up to make sure everybody gets out in a timely manner. So back to you, Katie.
So Charlie kind of already alluded to this, but we have a fabulous learning guide that we are going to share with you guys. I'm going to put a link into the chat. My screen might change a little bit as I try to find it. Operating on these, I have it right here. There we go. So we've got this fabulous learning guide, and it's going to walk you through everything that we're presenting on today. And the idea behind this is that you guys are then going to be able to go back, reference any of the information that we give you, walk through any of these activities that we'll provide with you, and utilize those with your teams, your school leadership team, your teachers, or whoever. So today you can just sit back, kind of absorb. We'd love to hear your comments, your feedback throughout, but also know that you've got this great learning guide that you guys can reference after the fact and come back to the learning so that you've got that. And I'm going to put that into the chat right now so you have access to that. And we'll keep coming back to that as we move on. So super excited about that. I'm going to go back to our slide deck. Are we still seeing our screen? Steve, I see you. Okay, great. Just making sure I didn't mess it up when I switched the screens back and forth, because you never know, I might do that. All right, so as we go through this is your table of contents in your learning guide. We're going to pull it up, we'll reference it back and forth, but we're going to take a minute and we're going to dive into the importance of feedback. And we're super excited about this. And feedback, we know, is a really tough thing to have, right? It's super important, but it's also really tough. So to kick off our learning, we are going to watch a little bit of this fabulous TED Talk. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. I'm going to reshare it so that I can share the sound. All right, so I'm going to hit play. Hopefully you guys will hear the sound. If you don't, let me know. We're going to kick it off with this for just a minute.
Everyone needs a coach. It doesn't matter whether you're a basketball player, a tennis player, a gymnast, or a bridge player. My bridge coach, Sharon Osberg, says there are more pictures of the back of her head than anyone else's in the world. Sorry, Sharon. Here you go. We all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. Unfortunately, there's one group of people who get almost no systematic feedback to help them do their jobs better. And these people have one of the most important jobs in the world. I'm talking about teachers. When Melinda and I learned how little useful feedback most teachers get, we were blown away. Until recently, over 98% of teachers just got one word of feedback: satisfactory. If all my bridge coach ever told me was that I was satisfactory, I would have no hope of ever getting better. How would I know who was the best? How would I know what I was doing differently? Today, districts are revamping the way they evaluate teachers, but we still give them almost no feedback that actually helps them improve their practice. Our teachers deserve better. The system we have today isn't fair to them. It's not fair to students, and it's putting America's global leadership at risk. So today I want to talk about how we can help all teachers get the tools for improvement they want and deserve. Let's start by asking, who's doing well? Well, unfortunately, there's no international ranking tables for teacher feedback systems. So I looked at the countries whose students perform well academically and looked at what they're doing to help their teachers improve. Consider the rankings for reading proficiency. The US isn't number one. We're not even in the top 10. We're tied for 15th with Iceland and Poland. Now, out of all the places that do better than the US in reading, how many of them have a formal system for helping teachers improve? 11 out of 14. The US is tied for 15th in reading, but we're 23rd in science and 31st in math. So there's really only one area where we're near the top, and that's in failing to give our teachers the help they need to develop their skills. Let's look at the best academic performer, the province of Shanghai, China. Now, they rank number one across the board in reading, math, and science. And one of the keys to Shanghai's incredible success is the way they help teachers keep improving. They make sure that younger teachers get a chance to watch master teachers at work. They have weekly study groups where teachers get together and talk about what's working. They even require each teacher to observe and give feedback to their colleagues. You might ask, why is a system like this so important? It's because there's so much variation in the teaching profession. Some teachers are far more effective than others. In fact, there are teachers throughout the country who are helping their students make extraordinary gains. If today's average teacher could become as good as those teachers, our students would be blowing away the rest of the world. So we need a system that helps all our teachers be as good as the best. What would that system look like? Well, to find out, our foundation has been working with 3,000 teachers in districts across the country on a project called Measures of Effective Teaching. We had observers watch videos of teachers in the classroom and rate how they did on a range of practices. For example, did they ask their students challenging questions? Did they find multiple ways to explain an idea? We also had students fill out surveys with questions like, does your teacher know when the class understands a lesson? Do you learn to correct your mistakes? And what we found is very exciting. First, the teachers who did well on these observations had far better student outcomes. So it tells us we're asking the right questions. And second, teachers in the program told us that these videos and these surveys from the students were very helpful diagnostic tools because they pointed to specific places where they can improve.
All right, I'm gonna pause this there. Why is this so important? Why do we show this video about where we're at and our feedback and end it right here? And the reason we look at that and we end there is because when we get that forward effective feedback and we get it in real time and in our real work, we're able to build capacity and see actual change in behavior. We know through science and through analysis and data collections and observations that we need more feedback, more than just feedback. We need more than just theory and strategies to change human behaviors in the classroom. We need more than just training on it. We need more than just little tidbits of coaching here and there. We need real-time feedback and practice in our classrooms, in our work of what we're doing in order to make this work and then change that student behavior. And we know that if we get that practice and coaching and actual work, we have a 95% chance of seeing change in individual behaviors in the classroom and teachers moving and growing, which is why feedback is so important. But if we don't have a safe learning environment, then with our teachers, the feedback's less likely to take place. If I were to ask all of you to think of a time you received feedback, anytime, think of that memory and what feedback you got. Was it a time where you got positive feedback, or was it a time you got negative feedback, constructive feedback? Was it a positive experience, or was it a negative experience that was scary? Most of the time, the first experience that we think of is one that probably was not a great experience. The first experience I think about when I think about time I got feedback from one of my school leaders was when I was teaching 6th grade in a middle school here in Canyon School District. I had a class of 42 students, so it was a larger class. It was a Title I school, and I had quite a few homeless shelters that fed in and out of our school. And I also had a behavior unit in there. And my principal came in, and it was for my mid-year evaluative observation. And I had 2 behavior students in my classrooms, and they both just kind of lost it during my lesson. And like the whole class, it crashed and burned. I had a student get up and start cussing at other students. I had a student not willing to give up his cell phone and put it away and engage in the lesson. And my administrator sat in the back and just watched the whole show crash and burn. And afterwards, he came up to me, and the feedback that I got was, how could I better prepare myself to avoid these experiences with my students? And it was all feedback about what I did wrong as an instructor and how I didn't teach my students anything in that lesson because it just crashed and burned, right? And so that is my biggest feedback, is how do I prepare better so that I don't end up with a crash and burn site with my administrator in my classroom. But not all feedback sessions need to be negative experiences. A lot of them can be constructive and positive feedbacks and ways that we could take that environment and I could have learned a lot more, because there was a lot I did wrong in that lesson, right? Like there were many crashes and burns and big flares and that we could have changed, and that I could learn more than just to prepare better, but I didn't learn how to prepare better or anything along those lines. So within this, there's an activity, and we're just going to kind of walk through it. I don't need feedback right now, but I want you to think about that time, that very first feedback session that popped into your mind when I asked you. And I want you to identify, was that a negative experience or a positive experience? And think about that to yourself. And think about what are a few do's and don'ts that you would do as an administrator if you were in that feedback session as the administrator rather than a teacher? What are those things that you would do versus not do? And then I want you to think about how can you use that information from that experience to drive further feedback sessions that you have with your teachers in your classrooms. This experience and this activity is right here in our learning guide. If you jump down to page 2, it's right here. You can walk through it. You can go back to it, do it on your own, do it at other times. We hope that you will, but it's right there for you to kind of go back. But just think about those experiences. And you can also utilize that to help create a safe environment in your class, or not in your classrooms, in your schools, so that you can have a safe learning environment to provide that good feedback. I also didn't have a great relationship with my administrator. I saw him twice a year. He was in, he was out, and those were the only times I really got feedback from him. So I didn't have a great foundation for that. But we harp on this because we know that the effect size of feedback is huge. Most everybody here is probably familiar with Hattie's effect size and how he's done a meta-analysis of all these different types of learning strategies and what's the most effective. And we know that feedback has an effect size of 0.79, which is huge, right? If we can provide that effective feedback, we're going to get that. And we know that this relates to student learning, not necessarily teacher learning, but it also applies there, especially as we think about Vivian Robinson and her work and how she brings through and pushes towards having this high quality instruction. And we know that within leading teacher learning and development in our schools, we can have an effect size of 0.84, which is huge. And if we can combine that effect size of leading teacher and learning development with effective feedback, we are going to have a huge growth within our teachers. And we're going to see that individual behavior of our teachers in their classrooms grow exponentially as we move forward. And so as we do this, we're going to kind of focus on our one area of building relational trust. And we're going to do that through diving into these 5 basic needs with Charlie. So Charlie, I'm going to pass it to you to dive into that.
All right. Thank you, Katie. And Katie, am I giving feedback or is it just on my side? Nope, no feedback. Good. Okay. So really appreciate you kind of setting the stage and reminding all of us why feedback is so important. The research is pretty clear. No matter where you look, that we will have higher performing people and higher performing schools with effective feedback going on in our buildings continuously. The question then becomes, what is effective feedback, right? What makes feedback effective versus ineffective? And Katie already started speaking on a little bit of those pieces. But to stay true to our theme that we've been learning, we believe that understanding human motivation and understanding how humans operate is an important thing to know if we're going to be giving effective feedback, because as far as I know, most school leaders are giving feedback to humans. Not me. We do now have therapy dogs and stuff in schools occasionally, but other than that, we're mostly giving feedback to human beings. So one of the frameworks that has been extremely helpful for me is I've gone around the country coaching different principals and school leaders, as well as when I was a principal and when I was a school leader, is William Glasser's framework on basic needs. And before we dive into that, just want to remind everyone about the brain. And we've talked about it a lot, but it does apply to feedback, right? Because the brain is going to be the central unit that is taking that feedback, processing it, and deciding what or if they're going to do anything with the feedback. So just a real quick reminder again, you've got in your handout on page 5 everything that you're seeing here and some activities that you can kind of go through. But to think back just about that piece of cortisol versus oxytocin and the brain and how that relates to feedback, this column here that Katie just flashed up, you can go back, Katie, shows specific things that the research has shown create cortisol, right? And start to ignite that fear hormone in the brain, which will eventually just pretty much shut down the brain. Eventually, if enough of that cortisol fires, if you remember from our previous sessions, the amygdala will actually hijack and shut down the rest of the brain. And of course, there's really no need at that point to be offering anybody any feedback if they're completely shut down, not listening, not hearing any of the feedback that you're providing. This is actually from research on conversational intelligence, where they actually hooked up high-tech machines to the brain so that they could see those neurochemicals firing and where they were firing, depending on what kind of behaviors people giving feedback were exhibiting. And we learned, as we are judging people, as we are dictating things to people and telling them this is the way it is, my way or the highway, as we're criticizing people, as we're punishing people, withholding information from people. One of my colleagues or one of my supervisors used to always love withholding information from me, and she thought that was a great way to give me feedback, was to make sure I knew that I didn't know everything. All of these kind of stimulate that cortisol, right? And kind of get us to that point where we're not really even able to listen to anything that's being provided. The opposite's obviously oxytocin. We want to get the oxytocin, if we position ourselves when giving feedback, more into that facilitator role. We're really kind of facilitating the conversation. It's more of a back and forth conversation with the person we're giving feedback to, including the person, asking lots of questions, making sure we're sharing a little bit about ourselves and our own experiences and those sort of things, empowering the person, making sure they know the conversations about their development, and it's a collaborative conversation, and we're going to celebrate the positive things. These are all things that will stimulate that oxytocin and get the brain in a place where it can even process and use the feedback that we're given. So just a little reminder about that. That's not really new information, but it is, I think, just really important, because if this part's not right, it's really hard to go much further. So then to dive back more into Glasser's research and the framework he's created, is this idea of the fact that all humans are behaving and doing whatever it is they're doing to meet one or more of the basic needs that you see on this slide here. And he has a wealth of books in all contexts. He was actually a counselor. He was a psychologist himself. But a lot of people took the information and the research and the practice that he was using it as a psychologist and started implementing it into other fields. They started implementing it into organizations. And of course, there was a whole group of people that took it and started trying to implement it into schools. And what Glasser says is that humans are behaving to meet the need for safety, belonging, power, freedom, and fun. And that all things we're doing is our best attempt to meet one or more of those basic needs. Power is not power over people, but feeling powerful yourself. So we're behaving sometimes in a way to feel powerful or feel like we're in control. We're behaving in a way to get that sense of belonging, to feel safe, to have some freedom, and to have some fun. And so the other thing he says is we learn over time what activities that we participate in help us meet those basic needs and what activities don't help us meet those basic needs. And if it's an activity that doesn't help meet our basic needs, like for me, singing in front of a large group of people, then I stop doing that activity. I don't engage in that activity anymore. If it's something that does help us meet our needs, then we're much more likely to engage in it. We're much more likely to participate in it. We're much more likely to double down and spend a lot of time, effort, and energy doing it if we feel like it's something that will help meet those needs. So think about that when it relates to feedback, right? If it's feedback that is a need satisfying feedback, if it's feedback that's helping this person meet those needs that you have in front of you right there, then they're going to engage in it more. They're going to participate in it more. If it's feedback that's not, they may disengage, right? And they may pretend to engage. They may give you the old smile and nod, right? But they're not actually fully engaging. The same thing is true of people. As human beings, we actually figure out what people in our lives are helping us meet our needs. Think about it. I'm sure you have people, friends, family members, spouses, that you would say, you know what, when I hang out with this person, I feel like a pretty powerful person. When I hang out with this person, I have a lot of fun. This person helps me feel safe, right? Those people become part of what Glasser called our quality world. And we put them in our quality world. And those are the people we hang out with. Those are the activities we do because they are needs satisfying. But we also delete people out of our quality world all the time. If it's somebody that helped us, that made us feel unsafe, like we were talking about in the earlier session, if it's somebody that does not provide that freedom and fun, eventually they just get deleted out of our quality world. And one thing Glasser says is once you've been deleted out of someone's quality world, it's almost impossible to ever get back in. And think about the people you've deleted out of your quality world. Are they, how many of them are now back in your lives? And the ones that are, it probably took a lot of effort and energy and time for them to get back into your lives. So just a framework to think about. And I'm going to go a little bit more specifically into each one of these needs just real quickly with an example to hopefully help you make it a little bit more concrete. So you might see a stud in the middle of this picture with that long 1990, I think that was probably 95 hair. That is me playing on a AAU basketball team that got third in the nation. We got all the way to the national championship semifinals, Final Four, and lost the game to some team out of Texas. This team had a bunch of D1 guys, 4 or 5 guys that played Division I basketball. And of course, you see me there in the middle. I got to practice with them, but you might see I don't even have a jersey, right? I'm wearing a t-shirt. So I didn't get a lot of playing time on this team. Well, there were 2 coaches, Coach Jones and Coach Payne. And ironically enough, Coach Payne is exactly like the name sounds. Coach Jones was a very positive guy. He's a very upbeat guy. He took the time to really understand my game, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. And when he would coach me in a very calm voice and a very, hey, you know what? You're not a D1 athlete, but here's some things you can work on. Here's some things you can get better at. You know, there was just a demeanor about him that was very safe and secure. And so I knew when I worked out with Coach Jones, I could get better. And I listened to every word he said. I'm now coaching third and fourth grade children on the weekends, and almost half the stuff that I passed on to these children came from Coach Jones and all that he taught me in that very safe environment. The opposite on the very same team was Coach Payne. Coach Payne, he yelled everything, right? He gave me all the, he was the loud guy and the in-your-face guy and the how dare you not dunk the ball, right? Again, I'm on this team and I'm not the best guy on the team. He made sure I knew how terrible I was all of the time. He made sure he embarrassed me in front of these guys whenever one of them might block my shot and send it into the third row of the bleachers. So how likely was I to listen to any feedback that guy ever gave me? How likely have I been to pass on any information that he's ever gave me as a coach? I can't tell you one thing that Coach Payne taught me about anything. We ran some sort of offensive scheme for all day, every day for months. I can't tell you one thing about that offensive scheme that we ran when Coach Payne was coaching. I can tell you a lot about what Coach Jones taught me. So this is just one example of how important safety is and really coaching and giving effective feedback. Next example is belonging. I'm working with a principal at Fairview Elementary School in North Carolina, and he inherited the 3rd lowest performing school in the state of North Carolina. Like not the 3rd lowest elementary school, but the 3rd lowest school. There's thousands of schools across North Carolina. This was down at the bottom. They're now over 75% proficient. They are one of the highest growing schools in the state. They're not even anywhere close to a low performing school. And they've been that way now for 2 or 3 years. He credits one of the many things that he's done that he credits is this morning huddle that he has with his teachers. Every morning they get together, they huddle up, they talk about they celebrate each other's birthdays. They talk about anything that might be going on in somebody's life that might be standing in their way of being a great professional that day. They talk about any big events coming up for the day, calendars, and they're going to have a pep rally that afternoon or whatever the big events are. And sometimes they just play a goofy game. Sometimes they just do a goofy competition. This is a picture of a high five game that we taught them that they were playing as part of their morning huddle just to get the energy going, just to have some fun. To me, that creates a sense of belonging, right? And he talks about how he had to create a culture of feedback. He had to create a culture where if we're the 3rd lowest performing school in the state, people are going to have to hear some hard feedback. People are going to have to hear about what's working, what's not working in a pretty intense level, in a pretty consistent level. And without this sense of belonging, and without that morning huddle, he truly believes, and I would agree with him based on Glasser's research, no one would have ever engaged in that feedback. But they knew these people had their back. They knew these people loved them anyway. They knew these people cared about who they were, both as a human and a professional. And that allowed them to be able to give that effective feedback. Next one is power. And again, I mentioned power is feeling like you are in control. It's not having power over somebody. We don't, as human beings, necessarily care if we have power over somebody, but we want to feel like we at least have power over our own selves. And if you've ever been flying on an airplane and you feel the airplane go like, right? We all freak out. Everybody freaks out when that happens because you have no power in that situation, right? You have zero control if the airplane's going to crash or not. That's something you have no control of, right? So having control and feeling like you are the one in power is part of creating those conditions that we need to create so that people will actually listen to our feedback. This is an example. Ed Picard's an assistant superintendent up in Alaska, in the school district where I'm coaching in Alaska. This is a picture of his desk. This is not that long ago. It was a couple years ago. And what we got in a conversation about is how many little pieces of technology are on his desk, right? And he wasn't even really paying attention to any of this technology as much as he was paying attention to the iPad that he had in his hand. And what this picture demonstrates to me is how much we change things in education. I mean, look at that phone on the left, right? And then look at the laptop, and then he's got an iPod in his hands, and then there's a CD player sitting there, right? All on the same guy's desk. We're constantly changing, whether it's technology or it's something else. Well, we need to be aware as we make all these changes that may be creating a situation where people don't feel that powerful anymore. Somebody may have been really good at answering that phone on the left, but now we're asking them to operate an iPad, and they might not be as good at that. And so they may not be feeling near as powerful or near as in control if we're asking them to do new things, or we're asking them to innovate, or we're asking them to think differently. So power is a real thing to be thinking about when we're offering feedback. And are we giving people feedback on something new that they may or may not be comfortable with? Are we giving them feedback on something they've been doing for 20 years and are really, really good at and feel more like in control of? Just power is a dynamic that we want to pay attention to and make sure that we're creating situations in our school where everyone has some chance to feel powerful. The teacher that's been there for 35 years and still doesn't know how to open an email, and the brand new teacher that can do all things technology, but she has no idea how to teach a child. All of those people still have somewhere, some way to feel like a powerful person. Next one, Katie. Freedom. I've got a picture here of some crayons and markers. Basically, the easiest way to think about this is, as a leader, if you want to give someone choice about something, give them the choice. If it doesn't matter to you how they do it or what format they do it in, give them the choice. If it does matter to you, don't give them the choice. We tell this to teachers all the time. If you don't care if they color it with crayons or markers, tell them they can color it with crayons or markers, and make sure they know that they have that freedom and choice to color it with crayons and markers, right? Obviously you're not working with crayons and markers with teachers as much, but it may be a lesson plan template. Do you care if they turn in their lesson plan in a refined lesson plan template? If you do, great. If not, give them some freedom and choice. Make sure they know what they have freedom on, what they have choice with, and what they don't. Do you care if they go step out and go to lunch during their planning? You might really care about that. That might be a real problem, or you might not. If you don't, let them have the choice. The more we can provide freedom and choice for those that we're trying to lead, the more receptive they're going to be when we come to give them feedback. And then the last one is fun. Katie, can you click to fun? This is a picture actually from the school that my kids go to. And Nikki Domley is the principal there. And every winter she does a winter event. I can't remember what they call it. Winter Wonderland or something. And the whole community comes. Some of the older guys show up and play a little Christmas music in the lobby. They make cookies, they decorate trees, they just do all those Winter Wonderland things. And I asked her one time, being the educator I am, say, you know, this would be a great time to talk to your parents about their students' behavior. This would be a great time to share your latest data reports with your teachers. And she said, no, that's not the point of this time. This time is to have fun. That's what we're here to do today. We're here to have fun. And once they have me as a reference in their head of a fun person, then I can start giving them feedback. Then I can start talking to these parents about their students. I can start talking to these parents about behaviors and academics and all those other things. The first thing they have to see is that I'm a fun person. And I thought to myself, well, duh, that's exactly right, Nikki. You do have to be a reference in people's head of a need-satisfying person, somebody that can help them have fun, freedom, belonging, safety, before I can ever offer them any feedback. So hopefully this makes sense. If you want to drop a question in the chat, go for it. There's a couple reflective activities in your learning guide to kind of help you kind of more personalize, make this a little bit more relevant. There's also some articles, or just not even really articles, white papers, I don't know what you would want to call them, just little write-ups that kind of summarize everything I went over just now. So now let's move from thinking about being that person and creating that environment that's need satisfying into the actual conversation. So what happens when we actually dive into the conversation? How do we continue to make that a need satisfying conversation? Because even if we've done all this work ahead of time, you can mess it up real quick in a conversation sometimes. I know I have. I know I've gone from even being the most need satisfying person I can be, I can say the wrong thing or approach it the wrong way, and all of a sudden I've messed some things up. So a couple little tips and tricks to think about as you're thinking about actually facilitating a conversation is when you're thinking about safety, make sure teachers know that you're here to be constructive. Make sure teachers know that you're here to help them be better, and that this is going to be in constructive feedback. It's not just trying to tear anybody down. I know sometimes people can be very annoying, and I know that I want to sometimes tear people down, but that's not what feedback's about, right? It's about helping people be better, making sure they feel safe enough and know that that's the whole objective of the feedback is improvement. Also, just consider your position of power. That's a mistake I often made early in my leadership career, is forgetting that I was the principal, and that my job, or this person's job, kind of depended on the evaluation I gave. I forgot that sometimes, and I thought, why are they taking all my feedback so serious? Why are they so worried about what I'm telling them? Well, you know, you're the person that hired them. So that's knowing your position of power in the conversation is important to pay attention to. And then, like we talked about earlier, just anything you can do to avoid that fear hormone and that cortisol drip, the better. Belonging, a couple things to think about. And again, you guys probably are well aware of this, but just a reminder, the more you're building that relationship with them as a human, even outside of whatever you're giving them feedback on, the more they feel like this person knows me, this person cares about me, the better. Used to have a mentor of mine always say, make sure you know every staff member's dog's name. And I think what they meant by that is, know who their kids are, know who their dogs are, know what they care about, what they're passionate about, and start the conversation with something about that, right? If the person coaches basketball on the weekends, start the conversation about how the basketball game went. If their mom's sick, start the conversation asking them how their mom's sick, right? We know those things, again, we've proven those things start to stimulate that oxytocin, start to get that energy moving towards the front. And it seems like a simple thing to know the dog's name, but it's critical. It's really important. And then again, looking at that list that we talked about earlier and looking what other ways can I really get that oxytocin going from the beginning of the conversation before I even dive deep into the feedback. What else can I do to ask or celebrate or whatever to get that oxytocin flowing? Some couple of tips on the power. You guys may have probably heard about the 3-to-1 positive feedback ratio. really to tie that into Glasser and Power, that's making sure this person understands, I recognize there are lots of things you're good at. I recognize there are lots of things that you've mastered even maybe, and that you have full control over. And before I dive into things that I think you could get better at, let's make sure you know that I recognize these things that you are good at. Be specific, digestible, actionable. Katie's going to dive into that a little bit more. A lot of research around things like if you just say good job, that almost can do more harm than good. If you just say, oh, I really liked it, that was great, and you just leave it at that, how that actually can maybe stimulate more cortisol than you were hoping. Ensure opportunities for teachers to ask questions to clarify. So once you've given that feedback, again, making sure they feel like they're in control, allow them to ask questions, allow them to clarify your feedback. Don't be in a position of being offended if they ask you questions, but just really make sure they know, I want you to ask these clarifying questions, and I might even want you to give me feedback. And that's been tough for me in the past when I'm giving someone feedback and then I flip the script. Just had that situation happen in a performance review I was doing at the end of the year. I asked just kind of superficially, not thinking they would actually give me feedback. Hey, what feedback do you have for me? And then she pulls out a list. She had like a list of feedback. She was ready to go with all this feedback for me. So sometimes, making sure that we understand it's a two-way street and that I welcome feedback as well as giving feedback. Freedom, a couple maybe ways you could do freedom. Is it moved and I don't see it, Katie? Oh, there it goes. Okay. Base the feedback around their own goals. I know we do a lot of goal setting with teachers and a lot of front loading that work to make sure everybody agrees on the goals that they have for growth for the year. But the more they're their goals, and then we center our feedback and build our feedback around how well they're doing on meeting and growing towards those goals, the more we're offering them freedom, right? And then, of course, asking questions. When you decided to do this during your lesson, what was it you wanted? What were you going for? What were your goals? What were you trying to accomplish when you did X, Y, and Z? Again, asking questions, centering things around their goals gives them that sense that, you know what, I'm owning this. I'm owning my own professional growth. And then fun similar to belonging, right? Making sure we laugh a little bit, making sure we have some ties to some goofy stories and goofy connections. That's part of fun. But also when Glasser talks about fun, he talks about fully engaging in things, and that those things that we're fully engaged in are the things that are fun for us. So a couple ways to make sure they get fully engaged is if there's some new tip or trick you give them during your feedback, you say, hey, you may want to try this, you may want to try that. Follow up that by sending them a resource, send them an article, or have your instructional coach go in and model something for them, or follow up the learning during the feedback with some sort of tangible resource so that they really feel like, okay, I'm getting in this. This is applicable to me. And again, make sure the learning is relevant, making sure the feedback is tied to things that they actually want to work on, and it's not just out of thin air kind of feedback. These are ways to make sure that they're fully engaged in the feedback. And really, once we're fully engaged in something, that's what fun is, right? That's the definition of fun. So talking a lot, but hopefully this gives you some things to think about. And again, referencing back to the learning guide for some additional kind of just reflection and thinking and processing. And I'm going to turn it back to Katie.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to push us on and tie this back to what we've talked about. We've been linking back to Vivian Robinson's student-centered leadership, and that we've got these leadership capabilities we're always working towards and these leadership dimensions. And through this course, these series, we're really focusing on building that relational trust and building up teacher learning and development. And you can see that by applying this 5 basic needs and creating this need satisfying environment, you've really created a strong foundation to provide some good, strong, effective feedback. If you remember in our last session, we talked a lot about planning classroom visits, and we talked about how we need to be really intentional when we're planning classroom visits, and how we need to plan out the logistics beforehand, and that we have to be very specific, because as school leaders, you guys have 1,000,001 things on your plates, and you do not have enough time to do it all. And in order to try to get into these classroom visits, we have to be intentional, and we have to know exactly what we're going in for, why we're going in, and how we're going to do it, or else it's going to be pushed off and pushed off and pushed off, and before you know it, the school year's done. Along with talking about intentionality and the logistics of planning those classroom visits, we talked a lot about planning our feedback delivery, right? Is this going to be a sticky note? Is it a quick little note of a positive that they did that you want to leave? Or is it a quick wondering that they did? Do you want to engage in an actual conversation with them? Are you going to sit down and give them face-to-face feedback so you can do that? But what type of feedback are you going to give them that's tied to being intentional as to why you're going into their classrooms? And we're going to push that a little bit further today with talking about what is your role when going into the classroom. As school leaders, there's 2 main roles in which you guys can play when you go into classrooms. You can be a constructive role where you're going in and giving them ways to learn and to grow and supporting them, completely formative assessment types, or we can take on that evaluative role where we're actually collecting this data, where we're going to give them a review on their performance, and that's going in their legit file or of sorts, right? As school leaders, this is really hard because almost everything you do is going to take a role or play a role into the evaluation at the end of the year. And so this is really tricky for school leaders, but it's also really important to identify when you want to be constructive and when this really is just a formative assessment pop-in. How are we going to provide this feedback to our teachers in a way that's going to help them improve their teaching strategies and their measures as a teacher, and not feel evaluative, and try really hard not to take them back to be evaluative as a school leader. And so as we dive into these and we jump into, we're going to talk about some effective feedback strategies. Those strategies can play a role in both being a constructive role and an evaluative role. But for the sake of this exercise and these conversations, I want you to think about it as a constructive role, as an instructional leader, not as an evaluator. So as we think about feedback and we think about how we're just trying really hard to create this need-satisfying environment through utilizing these 5 basic needs, and we don't want all of that to go to the wayside. Like Charlie said, we can have a great foundation built, and then we can ruin it in the beginning, first 3 minutes of a conversation, right? We want to make sure that doesn't happen. So by doing that, we're going to utilize these effective characteristics of drafting feedback. And there's 7 of them up here that we go through. One of them is being safe, right? It's creating an environment where teachers feel comfortable to receive this feedback, but also to give feedback, because they have to have that space, like Charlie said, to provide that feedback. The other characteristic is being purposeful in it, right? Is this goal driven? Is it tied to our school-wide goals? Is it tied to the teacher's individual goals? Or are you just giving them feedback that is way off in left field that you think you want them to know about? Is it timely? Are you giving them feedback on an observation or something that happened 3 months ago? Is it something that happened a month ago? Or is it something that happened yesterday, right? It needs to be timely so that they can apply it in the right time that they're doing this. And it needs to be specific, right? We're going to talk about a little bit later about this ladder of inference, and we want to stay low on that ladder of inference. We want to be specific and talk about specific details within it. We also need it to be digestible, right? We can throw 1,000,000 things at people, and they then get so overwhelmed that they have no idea where to start. So it needs to be truncated and digestible in what they can do. And then shared, it has to be a 2-way street, right? Teachers have to have the opportunity to give feedback to their leaders. They also have to have an opportunity to share how they're feeling about the feedback and about their current space and where they're going. When I go back to the experience that I had where my classroom completely crashed and burned, and I just got told how terrible of an educator I was, right? It would have been really great for me to have an opportunity to share how I was feeling in that moment and how I felt during that, and ask questions to get some specific feedback of things I could do to help avoid that next time. And the last one is being actionable. We really need to be able to have some actions that are within the feedback, things that I can actually do, some next steps, some strategies to try, some things to actually do to improve my learning, rather than just being told that was terrible, fix it. Give me some ways that I can do that, right? So we want to do that. All of these are also in the learning guide that we've got right here, shared for you on page 8. So if you go into there, it's got these characteristics, it's got a quick description of all of them, as well as some activities that you can go through to help you increase or improve the way that you're delivering your feedback. And as to keep everything aligned together, we always want to make sure all of these are aligned to our basic needs. So having safe feedback for teachers, it builds up safety, it builds up belonging for them. Purposeful feedback, it ties into freedom and fun. Kind of like Charlie said, fun is being all in, right? When we have purposeful feedback, something that I can do and learn and grow, and you're doing better at it, you have fun while you're learning and it becomes purposeful and meaningful to you. Timely, that comes with power. If it's timely, it's something they can do something about. They can take action in it and they can own that power in changing their instruction. Specific, same thing. It provides them a space to do something with that feedback rather than just take it and feel like they've got nothing to do and there's nothing they can do about it, right? In my experience, after I got my feedback, I didn't feel powerful. I felt like there was nothing I could have done and I just was a terrible teacher. Digestible. Overflowing with feedback doesn't help us. We get overwhelmed. So keep it chunkated so that we have the power to make those actions and to move forward. And having shared feedback, having that opportunity to have that two-way conversation, it helps us feel safe. It helps us with belonging and it helps us feel powerful that we have a way to do that. And our last characteristic, actionable. And of course that links to power because we have the power to do something about the feedback and with the feedback that we just received. Within that, we are getting really close to running out of time. We're 3 minutes and we've got a little bit more to go through. So I'm going to skip a couple of slides, but just know that it is all in our learning guide that you can go back to and reference. We're going to talk a little bit about vague. This is just a fun little snippet from Jerry Seinfeld, who talks about a time when he was in school and he submitted an essay, and the feedback that he got back from his teacher was, "This is vague." And so he responded with one word, "unclear." And they've been going back and forth ever since for years and years and years with one word, hazy, muddy, ambiguous, cloudy, right? Which is kind of fun, but did he really learn anything with that big feedback? And so we want to make sure that our feedback is very evidence-based. It is specific and it's based on the observations we took, right? Rather than saying, "Hey, that was a great lesson." Tell them what went really well, right? What data did you observe that went really well? The last time I saw it was in your classroom. You provided 3 opportunities for students to respond in 10 minutes. This time I observed 12 opportunities to respond. They know then exactly what they did. That was fantastic, right? So be very specific and almost black and white when you're providing this feedback. And that kind of plays into this ladder of inference. Some of you may have already heard about this ladder of inference. If you want to dive into a little bit more detail, on page 12 of our learning guide here, it dives into a little bit more details about it that you can go into. But in a nutshell, the ladder of inference is being very specific and ground level. Step 1 is selecting the data. State it. We had 3 girls that were actively engaged in your classroom this time. I saw 7 kids reading their book with tracking it with their fingers, right? Rather than saying your kiddos are actively engaged, tell them exactly what that actively is engaged. Using that data to do it. So you're going to paraphrase it and then state what's happening, right? Within there. And so you're staying really low on this ladder. As you take the steps up, then you start to think about, well, why is that happening? What's happening with those kids who are engaged, and what are we going to do next? And we don't want to go up here to this top. We want to stay low on that ladder of inference when we're providing this feedback. So that helps it be digestible, helps it be actionable, helps it be specific and purposeful for our teachers as we do that. So with our next steps, and this activity is also in our learning guide, I want you just to think about what is something you learned today, maybe something that surprised you, or maybe something you want to know more about. And we would love to hear what those are. And I'm going to put our emails in the chat. Actually, Charlie, will you put our emails in the chat so they can share those if they want to? 2, what is one concrete takeaway from today's lesson that you want to remember? Think about that and then go back to the learning guide, learn more about it, or be willing to reach out to us, and we're happy to share more information about that. And then what priorities from feedback, this feedback session, are you going to implement into your leadership abilities? And how am I going to make sure my teachers get consistent feedback and high quality feedback? Again, this activity is in the learning guide on page 13, so you guys can go to that and kind of engage in that reflection when you have a little bit more time within that. But remember, everything comes back to increasing and changing individual behaviors within our classrooms and within our schools. And by creating a need-satisfying classroom through these 5 basic needs and providing those effective feedback, we are going to have a 95% chance of seeing those behaviors change and improve our student learning, which is what we're all here for, is for our students and for them to learn and to grow. As always, we're always happy to share more information, chat more offline, so reach out. Marie also has our contact information, so please feel free to reach back. And we will be excited to come back, and we're going to talk about positions of control theory and open to learning conversations on our next visit. And of course, we always want your feedback, so if you would take a minute while Marie closes us out, I'm going to leave this up here for you to share some feedback about our session. We would love to hear it. All right, sorry I kind of snowblowed us the last little bit, but it works because in Utah we've got the storm warning, so I'm just, mirroring our weather.
I was gonna say, are you blowing the storm in? Oh no. Oh, well, Katie and Charlie, thank you so much for a great session today. We appreciate that. As she said, here's the feedback QR code, so please scan that. We always love getting that feedback and being able to share that with our presenters and going over that together. For everyone else, that's the end of our meeting. Hope you have a great afternoon, and we will see you next month or at Charter Day on the Hill or at the admin conference that's coming up in February. So have a great afternoon, everyone.